Welcome to another episode of Jews in the World. I'm Phyllis Zimbler Miller, and I have with me a guest who's going to tell you about an amazing organization that I just learned about. This is Naomi Nussbaum. She's the executive director of One Family, and I'm going to have her take it away and explain what they do.
Oh, thank you. It's really nice to be here today, Phyllis. Thanks so much for having me. One Family is an organization designed to help terror victims in Israel overcome some of their trauma as much as possible. We've been around for 23 years, offering emotional support, financial support, and legal aid. So we go out and approach terror victims after a terror attack. We help them fill out the paperwork that they need to complete for the government in Israel to give them assistance, and then we fill in the gaps after that.
So can you give us, you must have been very busy after October 7th. So can you take us through that scenario?
Yeah, so in that one day, that one heartbreaking day, all the people that we have treated in the past 23 years doubled overnight. Like the amount of new victims that we needed to reach out to doubled in one day. It's sickening and unimaginable. So terror attacks were always unacceptable, but you would have one here and one there. There would be, a problem on a bus or a problem at a bus stop or somebody gets stabbed, right? And there would be a short list of people and you could reach out to them, each one individually. After October 7th, the devastation was widespread. We had to pivot. That night, we opened up a 24-hour emergency call center to help people who needed immediate assistance. And since then, we've been having therapeutic events all around the country in different cities. But instead of trying to find each person and track them down, we publicize our events. So we'll say, if you're a new widow in Jerusalem, please come to our support group or this day of pampering on this date at this time. If you are a bereaved sibling in Tel Aviv, we're going to have this event for you on this evening. Please come and bring a friend. If you're a bereaved parent, newly bereaved from the South, please sign up for our retreat to Cyprus with other bereaved parents. And so that was one of the major pivots that we made after October 7th. We've taken about 750 bereaved parents on 4-day, 3-night therapeutic retreats to Cyprus in small groups of about 50, give or take, so that they can meet other people who are experiencing the same kind of trauma and bereavement, so that they feel fully seen, heard, understood, even without words. We sent therapists.
So yeah. I was on Cyprus for a few hours last summer. Do you do it in Cyprus rather than Israel so that the trauma of also having to listen to sirens doesn't interrupt the therapeutic atmosphere? So is that why you take them out of Israel?
100%. Yes, 100%. So the analogy is kind of like, how do you perform surgery to fix an injury when the injury is ongoing? And if anybody has spent any time in Israel, even if you're in one of the safer locations, if you turn on a TV or turn on radio, you're seeing explosions in the north and in the south. You're hearing about the soldiers that are fallen, and everybody knows someone. Businesses are collapsing because of the men who are in the reserves. There's nothing but trauma everywhere, even where you're, kind of safe. So yes, we go to Cyprus. There's no red alerts. There's no running to bomb shelters. Also, we know that being in nature is therapeutic. So we take them to a therapeutic retreat center that is gorgeous. There's forest, there's ocean, there's natural springs. We offer meditation and yoga classes. We bring therapists with us, and we bring a veteran bereaved person who has been dealing with this issue for many, many years, to give the newly bereaved or newly traumatized people, kind of like to show them there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like there is a healthy person with a successful life here who lost a child 15 years ago. There is a way out, and this person can show you how to do it from firsthand experience.
What's your background? Tell us how you got into this.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I have a background in early childhood special education. And in order to learn special education, you have to learn typical development, and then you learn what's atypical. And there are more things that are atypical that nobody knows about and are undefined and don't have a name than you'd ever would imagine, certainly more than the things that are defined. And you make an individual education plan. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. So you focus on unique individual education plans. And healing from trauma, PTSD, is the same way. It's really, really, really hard to correct PTSD. And something different is going to work for everybody needs something different. So we treat the individuals individually here at One Family. Everybody is going to have, a group of people will heal this way, a different group will heal this way, a different group will heal this way. So we have traditional emotional therapy, with therapists, and you can sit on a couch with a therapist, a psychologist, a social worker, a psychiatrist, whatever you need. But we have group therapy, right? And all kinds of alternative modalities like reflexology and deep tissue massage and yoga, mindfulness, meditation, art therapy, phototherapy, drama therapy, right? So many different types of therapy. Whatever a group of people think will help them, we will offer it. When somebody has a new idea, we say, great, let's try.
Well, what was the
So that's
inciting?
very similar. Yeah.
What was the
Sorry, go
inciting
ahead.
incident 23 years ago, and why do you need to do this? Because the Israeli government doesn't have the resources. Let's get into that a little bit.
So 23 years ago in August, the day of the Sbarro bombing, which was the deadliest terror attack at that time, was the day of our founder's daughter's bat mitzvah. That was the day of her 12th birthday. And everybody in Israel was devastated
Oh,
at the
it's the pizza bombing.
Sbarro bombing. That's right. Somebody walked in with a guitar case filled with nails
In
and
Jerusalem, right?
explosives. Sorry?
In Jerusalem, right?
Correct. Right in the center there. And it was the middle of the day, and mothers were out with their children, and people were on vacation. And, it was full of life and full of families. And the guitar case was designed with explosives and nails to inflict maximum damage. So, but that day it was Michal Belsberg's 12th birthday and her bat mitzvah. Her party was scheduled for a few weeks later, and they were devastated, and they just thought it was completely inappropriate to throw a festive party when so many people were grieving and injured. So kind of as a family project, they decided to take the money that would have been spent on the party and go meet all the survivors, go talk to them, get to know them, hear their story, and how can we help, right? They thought the financial assistance would be really good once they saw how much need there was. Because yes, the government helps, but when they were speaking to the survivors, what they heard was they felt really alone. They were isolated. The government didn't give them as much as they needed, or it took too long, or whatever the gripe was. The government can do as much as they can do. But back in those days, there was nobody focusing on terror victims, and they all felt very alone, very isolated, and their families weren't capable or prepared to really properly handle the person that was hurt, and it changed all the family dynamics. Yeah. So the Belsbergs, with Hearts of Gold, visited every survivor, helped as much as they could. They said, what's your next most immediate need, right? So there was a mother who was in the restaurant with her child. Child was fine. The mother was in the hospital, but the stroller was soaked with blood. And she didn't want to use that stroller anymore. And she said, can I please have a new stroller? It was little things like that. It's not the biggest deal to buy a new stroller, but back in the day when there's no Amazon and you're stuck in a hospital bed and you have a baby, you don't want to see bloodstains, right? So that was the next most immediate need to get through what was going to happen. And everybody had a different need. So that was how they started. 2 weeks later, a bomb was blown up, and they knew that that was their life calling. This wasn't just the Bat Mitzvah Project anymore. They had to help all the terror victims. So they formed the 501c3, and since then it has grown exponentially. And it started with them welcoming every single person into their own family, and now it's a formal, structured organization. and we offer a tremendous amount of services.
Well, just to make it clear though, although it's a family project, you will be happily take donations from other people.
Sure, yes. Yes. It's so big. We were operating on a $3.5 million budget, privately funded from the population, not the government, before October 7th. Now we're really hoping to scale, like to quadruple, to meet the need that has quite sadly presented itself since October 7th.
What are but is there also ways that people can come volunteer with you if they have special
Yes.
skills? So let's talk about,
Okay, so if people want to host events in their community, just to bring awareness, right? We have not typically spent much money on marketing because there are people who don't have food or places to live, or they need something, right?
right.
So we have not really had a marketing budget. Now we need to get the word out that we're here, we exist, we're doing critical work, and we need people's help. So if you want to throw an event, if you want to host us at your synagogue or at your local book club, we are happy to come and speak to you because we need to advocate for victims. People, yes, we need more therapists. We need more volunteers for sure. We need more donations. Maybe somebody can introduce us to a new foundation that hasn't heard of us yet, that loves to support Israel, that loves to promote growth, healing, development. We want to make Israel stronger, not weaker. We don't want the terrorists to win. You saw the psychological warfare on October 7th, right? Parents were murdered in front of children and they left the children alive for psychological warfare purposes, so that deliberately there are living human beings that will be tortured for the rest of their life with horrific memories, right? We're not going to let that happen. We are working on emotional well-being every single day. We want to teach resilience and strength. We want to help them bounce back with love and become productive members of society.
We will, yes. Why don't you say your URL now, but I will also put it in the description of this podcast.
Thank you. So in the United States, it's onefamilyfundus.org. And that's where we take donations in US dollars. We have a site in Canada, we have a site in Israel, and we can take multiple currencies. So if you're in Israel, yeah.
I noticed that on your site, if you go to onefamilyfundus.org, then there's the Israel and the Canada. So people can.
Exactly. They can choose. Correct. And so we are active all over the world. We are actively seeking new communities, new ways to support. We were we had an event last night in Los Angeles, which was amazing. And somebody who came to the event said, I'm filming a documentary on resilience. And just like that, within 12 hours, they were here filming us this morning. As somebody else said, I have a friend who would love to hear about this project and she has a foundation. What are you doing on Sunday? So all those kinds of warm connections are deeply appreciated. And, we'll take them any way we can get them. Now, given that I'm the executive director, of course, my expertise is in donations. I'm a chartered advisor in philanthropy, and I can help anybody make tax-savvy gifts. We can work together to make meaningful lifetime and legacy gifts. We can work on multi-year pledges and naming opportunities. So we have all of that to help both people. And I love getting to be the middleman of really beautiful work in the world.
What's your biggest wish? If you could just wave away, and not money, what is what you see as the biggest need that's not yet being met, even by one family? In other words, what's really needed more than anything?
No, we need money. We have to quadruple our staff to get more social workers and psychologists and therapists, trauma-informed counselors, to reach more people and have more programming. Right. So we are working around the clock. People gave up their days off regularly since October 7th. We're doing as much as we can, and it's not enough. We must quadruple our output and reach that many more people. So my dream would be for people to line up and tell me what their biggest wish would be, their most meaningful gift, something that they think is out of their reach. And then let me figure out how to make it work now. Let me help you accomplish more than you think you can do, so you can have a bigger impact, and we can help more people in Israel.
So that was what I wanted to ask you. So what if there are trauma victims? For example, at my synagogue, I heard someone who lives in LA, but happened to be at the Nova Festival on October 7th and is a survivor. So do you help with healing here in the United States, for example?
Well, our mission is to help terror victims in Israel. So that's our primary focus. There have been exceptions where we help somebody in the States because of a certain set of circumstances. But usually we help people in Israel. So for example, Ilan Ganeles traveled to Israel for a wedding and was murdered on the way to the wedding. The family who lives in Connecticut went to Israel to bury him in Sit Shiva, and then one family met him at the airport, to the family to greet them, to bring them some food, to offer our condolences. And then we sent many people to pay Shiva calls in the house in Connecticut. And we offered some therapy if they wanted. There was a best friend who needed counseling. So that's like an exception because half American, half Israeli. So of course, there's an adult orphan living in California who joined a retreat that we had, a 2-week retreat in Mexico for new orphans. And she came from California and joined the retreat. So yes, we're going to help her because she's an Israeli orphan currently living in California. It's our pleasure. But the more funds we raise, the more people we can help, of course.
Okay. And so what else would you like to share? I mean, is there any stories that really have just, some stories always stand out. And by stories, I mean true accounts that you'd like to share with our audience to understand how important your work is.
I'm sitting with a young man who's on the other side of the room from me, named Hadar. Hadar went to Eilat on October 7th, but both of his parents and his younger brother and his dog were murdered. And there are 2 other victims sitting about 30 feet behind me, right? One's mother was murdered, one's father was murdered. It's heartbreaking. I would say to everybody, a 25-year-old who has both parents murdered is no different than a 16-year-old or an 8-year-old who has both parents murdered, right? We have to take care of the orphans. The idea that an orphan stops at age 18 is a government construct. That means the government doesn't have to give him the benefits of an orphan. There was a rocket that fell in the north 2 weeks ago that killed 2 parents, right? Yeah. And the oldest child is 18, and then there were 2 younger children. The 18-year-old will not be treated like an orphan. There's deep injustice in that, and also we have to help. So we treat adult orphans, even though that's, maybe that's not a thing that people are aware of. But we have a group of adult orphans, and we have groups for younger orphans and older orphans.
I think,
so that,
let me just say, I think that's very important.
Yeah, yes. We're starting new groups that never existed before. And this is important for people to hear. I was in the Israel office 2 weeks ago. I met a woman who I recognized as a victim, and I asked her what she's doing in the office that day. She's now our employee. She volunteered immediately starting October 7th for 6 months, and now we've officially hired her. Her husband was murdered 6 years ago, and she's raising their 6 children on her own. One family became her family after her husband was murdered. And when October 7th happened, she had the tools and the desire. She knew it was her calling to go and help the new widows. And she said it helps make her stronger, but she was in such terrible grief and pain. And she said one family just knew what to say and when to say it and when to offer help. Not when everybody else does, after the Shiva, when everybody goes home, how do you go on when you're alone? How do you get out of that dark hole? And she felt like we had given her enough tools and resources to now be able for her to give back. So she's telling me about the widows support groups that we have. And we have separate groups for widows. We have groups for the widows who are now taking care of young children all by themselves, and they feel like they don't even have time to grieve on their own. They don't have a minute alone to mourn their soulmate because they have to take care of little kids. And then there are the widows who are maybe over age 50, 50 plus, with grown children who are out of the house. They lost the love of their life and their children left home. They're literally alone in the house and they don't know what to do with themselves. There are widows who are newly married, whose husbands were killed before they got the opportunity to have children. And, there's like a bitterness, a loss in the children that they didn't get to have because their husband was murdered too soon, all these young soldiers that are dying. And we even have a support group for women who are engaged and their fiancés were murdered and they never even made it to the chuppah. And I think there's something so touching and so beautiful about that, and bringing those people together so that they can really support each other like nobody else in the world can. We have a support group. We, of course, have support groups for bereaved siblings, but we have a special support group for 16 twins whose twin was murdered on or since October 7th, because they don't feel like the other bereaved siblings. They feel different and they needed their own support group. We have started a support group for bereaved grandparents because they now have a child who's a widow or a widower, or they lost, right? I'm saying two different things. We have a support group for people whose child is now a widow or a widower, and they are actively involved in caring for their child who's mourning and raising young grandchildren, which is a very different grandparent sort of life that they're used to living. They're not on anyone's radar. They're also mourning the loss. They lost a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law, so they're in pain. Nobody even thinks to help some people like this, right? So that is a really touching concept that's effective, and I want to bring awareness to that. But there are so many different kinds of tragedies. Everybody needs help.
And as you said, one size doesn't fit all. So I'm just so impressed with their understanding of these different groups, because to help them the most, you have to understand them really well.
Yeah, yes. So sadly, we've been doing this for 23 years. Our infrastructure was in place before October 7th. So we kind of know what the secret sauce is. We had to pivot a little bit, but really we're there. We need more resources and get bigger. We have to expand what we already know. We're not creating anything from scratch.
So as we end this interview, again, I ask the listeners to think about how you can help. It's not always financial. As you heard Naomi speak, it's really just helping make awareness. You can share this video. It's going to be up on YouTube. And as I said, when I came across the organization, I was so impressed, because I've done a lot of in the last few years sharing information about PTSD and for the American military and how it affects their families, etc. And I'm trying to describe, really, you look at someone who's a survivor, they look whole, let's say. I mean, physically, they can look whole. But the trauma, and sometimes what people don't understand, I'm not telling Naomi, she knows this, I'm telling the listeners, that PTSD doesn't always show up right away. So it can come months or years later and you don't know, or it can be triggered by doesn't have to be combat. I had a dear friend who luckily I realized it was something domestic. I don't mean she was beaten. That's not what I'm saying. But I understood that it was PTSD. And once I could explain it to her, then she knew what to do to get help. So that's why your work is so important, because if someone walks away from a bombing, God forbid there are less bombings, please, they may look okay.
Yes. Right. So we know that any broken bone or wound will heal much, much faster than PTSD. And it doesn't get better by itself. You need intervention to help PTSD. We offer many different types of intervention. And, if you know somebody in Israel who needs help, please tell them to call our office in Jerusalem. And if you'd like to support us, we would be forever grateful.
Okay, I think that's a really good thing to end on, is getting help. And the sooner you get help for PTSD, the better.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that is that was my public service announcement. So thank you so much for coming on. I will so again, it'll be onefamilyfunus.org, but it will appear in this description. And I hope people share this widely to get help for this fabulous organization. So
thank you so much, Beth.